Good morning. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott-Huffman. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the minister here at First UU, and I'm excited to see all of you today. I was once on a Southwest Airlines plane where the pilot said, if everyone will move to the right side of the plane and look out the window, the plane will tip over. And that's what today feels like a little bit in the feels like we're going to tip over this way a little bit, but I am a middle-aged woman with pale skin and some dark and some white hair that's short and spiky, and wearing my gray pants and plaid shirt that's gray and white today. And just want to engage with you this morning around this theme of welcome that we've been talking about this month. So throughout this month, we've explored the theme of welcome from various vantage points and through various lenses. And I especially want to thank you all for welcoming my Ecclesia students last week to talk about their own experiences of welcome and how they're all trying to build on their experience to intentionally welcome others. As we wrap up this month-long focus on the gift of welcome, that's actually what I'd like to talk about today, the intention part of intentionally welcoming others. This past week, I was fortunate to be a part of a cohort that met outside of Atlanta at a swanky place called the Inn at Serenbe. To tell you how swanky it is, as I was driving into Georgia, I stopped at a rest stop and the people said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I'm going to the Inn at Serenbe." And they said, "Oh, you're going to hang out with the movie stars." I didn't see any movie stars, but they're actually all on strike. So that was, makes perfect sense to me. The cohort is a part of a multi-year study that's around best practices in vocational discernment with young adults, which you might say is a big part of my day job. The convener of the study is a group that we call FTE, which stands for Forum for Theological Exploration. Anyone who's ever been a part of a program that FTE touched in any way will attest that FTE knows how to throw a party or, a conference. I've been in my current role with the campus ministry for almost 6 years now, and I've attended literally hundreds of meetings, workshops, and conferences, and hands down, the absolute best of them have been run by FTE. When I think about why this is true, why my experience of these things is consistently superior when these folks are in charge of the program, I'm aware that it all comes down to intention. You see, being welcomed by design is all about the things that a person doesn't have to think about when they're in a space because someone else thought about them extensively in advance. I want to say that again. Being welcomed by design is all about the things that a person doesn't have to think about when they're in a space because someone else thought about them extensively in advance. I have met so many people at conferences these last 5 years, and I rarely remember their titles. Honestly, I rarely remember their names because I have some menopause brain. I guess that's a thing. But I'll never forget a meeting with a ministry colleague who worked for FTE at a conference in Indianapolis where I had been walking around dumbfounded at this experience of everything being meticulously thought out. Her name was Reverend Dr. Darlene Hutto, and her title was Director of Experience Design. And she understands her vocational call as being an architect of sacred encounters. How beautiful is that? That's the job that I want. I want to be careful to point out to some people in this room that many of us are carrying religious trauma that can be traced back to religious experiences that were engineered to elicit particular responses and behaviors from you to the point of manipulation. And that's not the kind of experience design that I'm talking about here. On the other hand, those of us who pride ourselves in rational thought, raise your hand if that's you, most likely discount the kind of impact that people might experience through well-designed sacred encounters. Whether that sacred encounter is with a community or with the divinity of your understanding. Some of the things that make up that sacred encounter include what we experience with our senses when we walk into a place of worship. The visual elements of the space, the songs that are sung. In some traditions, they use incense and other things to have your sense of smell activated. The coordination of the message with religious education pieces and other pieces of the service, and the words that get spoken throughout a program. In the case of a Sunday service, those words are called liturgy. And the word liturgy literally means the work of the people, which I think is a helpful reminder that the thing that we do when we gather together is an act of corporate worship in the broadest sense. It's a thing that we create together, whoever's in the space, even if we just walked into it and had no part in its planning. So I'd like to think together just a bit this morning about the design of welcoming spaces. Because not only can we all help to design the experience of this space, I imagine there are spaces in the rest of our lives where we and others might benefit from some more intention around welcome and inclusion, whether those spaces are our homes, classrooms, civic or social groups, or any other place that, to use a biblical phrase, two or more are gathered. I can talk about the need to have our homes ready for welcome and inclusion in this way. Last weekend, my wife's church was a part of the Western Association of the Missouri Mid-South Conference of the United Church of Christ meeting, and their conference minister came into town. She lives far away somewhere and does most of her work remotely. And she was supposed to stay with some lay leaders of the church who on the day that she was to arrive, tested positive for COVID. Naturally, us being the other people who were to have dinner with her that night, it would have made sense that we would have said to Mary, it's okay, you can just stay at our house. Our house is in no shape to welcome anyone. We live among farm animals, and some of their things from outside come inside, and it's just not a space. And so as I think about creating spaces for belonging and welcoming, I want to think about all of the places where I exist day in and day out, and how do I get to welcome people in that space? Maybe I just accept the fact that my home is not one of them. Or maybe I can follow some of the things that I'll talk about today to try and figure that out. There are many schools of thought around design thinking, and specifically space design, both physical and digital, including but not limited to universal design and inclusive design. So Alita Joyce, who is a user experience researcher at Google, explains the difference between the two. She says, inclusive design describes methodologies to create products and experiences that understand and enable people of all backgrounds and abilities. Inclusive design may address accessibility, age, culture, economic situation, education, gender, geographic location, language, race, and more. The focus is on fulfilling as many user needs as possible, not just as many users as possible. Universal design aims to create one experience that can be accessed and used to the greatest extent possible by all people. Unlike inclusive design, universal design enforces a single design solution without need for adaptations, or specialized design. Inclusive design accepts and embraces multiple design variations so long as they achieve the desired outcome. In general, universal design is more widely used in tangible and environmental contexts. So as we think about what this means in our lives and how we adapt this to spaces, I know people who are educators in the room have thought very carefully about the spaces that they're creating and the places of belonging that people come into and what they experience in those spaces. Thankfully, we're learning in educational spaces how we can provide alternative forms of seating and alternative activities that make the learning that we're doing accessible to all people. But how do we use this in all of the spaces where we find ourselves? So a collective of built environment experts created 7 principles of universal design to guide design, products, and communications around the built environment. So here they are. Number 1, equitable. The design is useful and welcoming to people with various abilities. Number 2, flexible. The design accommodates a spectrum of individual preferences and abilities. Number 3, simple and intuitive. The design is easy to understand for people of various backgrounds, cultures, and skills. Number 4, perceptible information. The design incorporates necessary information understandable by people of various cognitive abilities. Now, I want to put a pin in that because churches are notoriously bad, notoriously guilty at using insider language and operating on this sort of everybody already knows that assumption. So we don't have to say that again because everybody knows it. Except that in this space this morning, there are a number of people who maybe haven't been in this space. And in every religious space, that's generally true at every occurrence of people gathering together, right? So everybody doesn't already know that. And that sort of approach is confusing and off-putting to newcomers and not friendly in neurodiverse communities, which is all communities. So just, let me say that again. Neurodiverse communities are all communities. Again, if 2 or more people are gathered there. So back to the list. Number 5, tolerant to error. The design minimizes hazards and consequences, intentional or not. In other words, sometimes we're going to mess up. Sometimes we're going to make choices that exclude others. Sometimes we're just going to not know what we didn't know. Low physical impact is number 6. The design is efficient and comfortable with minimal fatigue. And number 7 is size and space. The design is approachable for people of various body sizes, postures, and mobilities. Do we have spaces in our sanctuaries where someone can come in with a mobility device and they can choose to sit in more than one place? When I was in seminary, I had a friend named Ryan who was in a wheelchair, and he was not able to sit or stand in any of the places in the chapel. And one of the challenges that Ryan gave to all of us who would set up chapel every week is you could create a space for me to pull in and to put my wheelchair, but I would much more prefer that I could come into the space and choose where I want to sit so that there were multiple options of spaces where someone with a mobility device could be comfortable and be a part of things. So again, those were the principles of universal design. And all of that, I think, is a great way to start thinking about the physical spaces and experiences that we invite people into. But layering the elements then of inclusive design may help us get even further. That's because, as inclusive design leader Susan Goldsman writes, inclusive design doesn't mean you're designing one thing for all people. You're designing a diversity of ways to participate so that everyone has a sense of belonging. And friends, what in the world are we doing in any of our homes, classrooms, offices, or communities if we aren't cultivating a sense of belonging for the people that hang out there? In his book, Belonging, The Science of Creating Connection and Bridging Divides, Stanford psychology professor Jeffrey Cohen explains that we are all struggling with belonging uncertainty. I want to address that for just a second because the reality is some of us who move in the world in sort of marginalized spaces and experiences assume that the people who are privileged in the ways that we're not don't struggle with belonging uncertainty. I want to name that everyone in this room at some time struggles with belonging uncertainty, and it's not something that people who are marginalized get to own. It's the human experience. And so Jeffrey Cohen talks about this experience of belonging uncertainty and how we can benefit greatly from experiences that begin by relaying the simple message, you belong here. Cohen goes on to explain in detail how this bears out in his and others' social psychological research and how so much of our tension and human behavioral conflict is situational. He lays out a fairly convincing method of situation crafting and wise interventions to create the environments where community can form and thrive together based on the intentional design of our time together. Cohen writes, the research suggests that when that need to belong is thwarted or defeated, there's a whole suite of negative consequences, ranging from poor mental health, physical and mental, polarization, extremism, susceptibility, conspiratorial beliefs, disengagement from school or whatever the activity is. It's like when we feel alone and disconnected, we're on the defensive, and that creates a whole host of problems. He talks about the effort to avoid those problems as situation crafting. Writing, situation crafting refers to this idea that rather than trying to change people, we should try to change the situations that they're in. More so than we think, our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are affected by right here, right now, what's around us, how a teacher engages with us, the feedback we're getting, people's nonverbal signals. There's all these kinds of hidden messages in situations that we're in that can deeply affect us. So situation crafting refers to this sort of art and science of creating situations that promote belonging and thus bring out people's best in that situation. Cohen says that in our experience design, we can include wise interventions, a term used by social psychologists to describe the process of using precise theory and research-based techniques to help people draw adaptive meanings that allow them to accomplish their goals and flourish. For instance, under the category of happiness interventions, a therapist might invite a client to keep a gratitude journal and invite them to look back to remember the times and ways that the client's spirits have been lifted in small but significant ways that may lead to overall increase in satisfaction over time. Likewise, a mindfulness meditation might be used as an intervention to help people be more fully present in their current time and place. These and a host of other tools are available to us as we work to welcome others by design in all of the places where we live, work, learn, and play. So I want to invite you into an activity. An invitation to think about the places or situations where you'd like to be more intentional about creating a space of belonging for others, more intentional about reducing belonging uncertainty, and more intentional about increasing the overall sense of community that people experience. So take a moment to center yourself in your body and in this space. Take a deep cleansing breath in and exhale. And visualize the place or experience that you want to design to increase belonging. Your home, your office, your classroom, a civic space, your church. What is it like now? What are the sights, smells, and sounds that greet you? What has it been like in times when you felt especially welcome and comfortable there? What has it been like in times where you felt jarred, belonging uncertainty, discomfort? Now imagine stepping into that space and experiencing the maximum comfort and welcome that you can imagine. What does that look like? What does it feel like, smell like, sound like? And imagine how you might use wise interventions to begin to craft the experience in ways that are more welcoming. Imagine how you might be intentional about designing an experience of welcome for others. Now imagine the people that you want to feel welcome in that space. Imagine them stepping in or experiencing something that just diminishes their belonging uncertainty and makes them know that they belong there, that they are welcome. What is it like when they experience that? How does it feel for them and for you? Now I invite you to bring yourself back to this space. Look around at the community that is gathered here. Make actual eye contact if you can. Another person. If that's not comfortable, just glance in someone's direction. Knowing that what we know about one another and being open to what we might learn about one another, how might we together become designers of a truly welcoming experience? There's much about this work that's in writings about welcoming immigrants and refugees. If you were a part of a committee of people in a town welcoming refugees who need that place of shelter, but also that sense of belonging and community, what are the design elements that might go into that? What is the most extravagant message of welcome that you can imagine setting up for someone to experience? And then knowing the community that is gathered here today, let's ask ourselves together, how might we together become designers of a truly welcoming experience? That is my challenge this week as I come back from this place where I experienced this sort of over-the-top intention about the experience that I had in a place. I came back even more committed to our work together to give over-the-top attention to the experience that people have as they come into this community, wondering if it's the place for them, wondering if they belong here. And as we imagine the ways to make that so in all the spaces of our lives, may we be guided by our desire to welcome and include. May we be guided by our desire to love and to serve. May we be guided by our desire to learn and to transform both ourselves and the world around us. Because that, friends, is the work of community. And this is community. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen.